This week on Tschida The Show podcast, Tim and Curt Schilling talk more about the QuesTech camera system and that annoying little box on your TV screen that's supposed to represent the strike zone.
Well, they talk about framing nowadays, and it drives me absolutely crazy, because when it started to become a phrase, it was some of these Syracuse graduate GMs that, all that, you know what I'm saying, and just catch the ball. All right, that was our just catch it. Darren Dalton was a good framer before framing was even used. Terry Steinbach, when I first got to the big leagues, the teams were willing to sacrifice defense on catching for more offense. So we had Lance Parrish, we had Bob Kearney, we had guys that were big men that were a little hard to work behind, and they they could, that inside fastball on the righty would pull their arm in there, and the ball ends up over here, and it was good at the plate kind of thing, and you had to kind of work your way with them. Bob Boone is really the first catcher that worked at presenting the ball, and that's all he did was just catch it where it is. And he left you alone, and you learned from it. When you worked a game with Bob Boone, there was 3 footprints: right-handed batter, and then Bob's left foot and his right foot. And then left-handed batter, it was the left foot, right foot. That was it. He never did one of these, where they go down low and up,
it was for years they talked about catchers as being big guys, and I realized early in my career, umpires hate big catchers because, but at the time when I remember when you guys had the chest protector,
right,
and going away from that, I thought was one of the worst mistakes ever, because I thought that it gave you some safety and comfort to be able to get in there and call the balls and strikes, but I can remember having Mark Parent back there, and he's a nightmare to call.
Mark was tough to work behind. He was tough to work behind.
Well, and
big guy, and didn't get low. And he, I've always said, when we would walk out of Anaheim Stadium at night, Bob Boone would be outside the ballpark running laps with the 25-pound dumbbell in his left hand, because you have to be strong to catch, especially the ball coming inside, because it's running. You got to be able to stick it.
Well, I find it interesting. That's exactly, if you think about what he's doing right there, that's how you receive a ball.
Correct.
Not this way.
Right.
This way.
Exactly.
And I'll tell you, the one guy, Timmy, that I've always been wondering about, I heard about it, but he had a reputation as being this Gold Glove genius, and I heard umpires hated working behind him, was Charles Johnson.
Nicest guy in the world, but
had brick hands, and couldn't, and that was another thing that I paid attention to was,
absolutely,
I'm pitching a Saturday day game. Is the backup catcher going to be catching? And if so, who is that? And those kind of things.
Oh yeah. Well then, and finally, eventually it started to change. Terry Steinbach came up, and Terry was a good get low, catch the ball where it is. Just catch. I don't need to be tricked. You don't have to yank it. You don't have to pull it. Just catch it where it is. Leave it up to me. And then the best I ever worked behind was Brad Ausmus. Brad Ausmus was just a good athlete, a really, really good athlete. And he could, he's sneaky bigger than you think. He's like 6'1", and he just doesn't look like a 6'1" guy. And he would get in a crouch, no knee stuck out or anything like that, but his rear end was just about that far off the ground. And you talk about just, I mean, it was almost like there was nobody in front of you.
Boy, the best catcher I ever worked, I don't even know because he couldn't hit, so he didn't stick in the big leagues, but Ron Tingley with the Padres.
Yep.
He was about 6'1", but he would get down just like Bob Boone. And although Bob Boone was more straight up and down, had a back straight up and down.
You worked around Bob, but he made sure you could see.
Right. And plus, he didn't move that glove.
No. In fact,
but Taylor would get down into this little ball, and same thing, just receive it, pull it in like that. And that's what I see catchers doing today, is they're so smooth with the way they receive the ball. The only thing I don't understand about catchers today is they all are on one knee now, kind of exposing their crotch area more, and I don't see how they
have to frame it. They're supposed to frame it. That's their job.
And
now.
it's Tony Pena was the first guy that I ever saw really,
do that position.
But just to lessen the wear and tear on their knees.
Yeah.
Because that's a hard job.
Well, I had a game with Ausmus, and Frank had called to go over my QuesTech, and he goes, "Okay, August 27th, Cincinnati at Houston." let me ask you about this game. What do you want to know? He says, how do you think you did? I said, well, Frank, I'll tell you what. If you give me the 2-2 pitch on Adam Dunn, I might have hit 100%. He says, you got 100%. So you had the pitch on Dunn was the only one I had in question, and it was catcher influence. The pitcher crossed him up, but you got the strike anyway. Because he set up for the corner, not way over, just here, and he had to cross over the plate to catch it. But the whole ball had the plate. Dunn never said a word, and I said, yeah, but sometimes they'll flag you on that one. He said, yeah, that's. And he says, listen, I know you're having a tough time adjusting to this because you had your own way of doing things for a long time. He says, just keep doing it. Just keep doing it.
I was, and that's a great point, Timmy. I was always curious about that. Like, it was how I realized how you guys did your job behind the plate. And one of the reasons I got strikes consistently called Maddox and Glove, if I set up on the inner half of the plate for a ball in the corner and I misfired across the plate,
right,
9 times out of 10, if it was a strike, it wouldn't get called a strike.
Yeah, it's you're asking for trouble, mainly because now, okay, wait a minute. If you're going to be telling me that it's where it crosses the plate only, that's the only factor, now you got to start doing this. You got to start doing that. You got to do, all right. It's either, like you said, good for one, good for all. Make him do what you're making the other guy do.
Well, and that's what I kept going back to the Maddox thing, why he got his calls, because when I threw a 4-seam fastball, I didn't want the ball moving. When I missed, I wanted to miss within the glove.
Right.
And you realize you're talking about a thousandth of a second where you're set up over the inner half of the plate, and all of a sudden you got to look across the strike zone,
right,
and interpret in 3D,
right.
Okay, where did that ball cross the blah, blah, blah? And it was funny because I always felt like 9 times out of 10, you're like, well, you didn't throw the pitch you wanted to throw, so you shouldn't be expecting me to call the strike anyway.
Right. And that was the other thing when Quest Tech first came on board, they were finding that there was a serious, not a serious, but a league-wide trend amongst guys that were more generous on the outside corner to a left-hand batter versus the right-hand batter. I said, well, that's easy. The low outside corner on the right-handed batter is the hardest pitch to call because it's the furthest away from you. You have to look clear across his body, and if you've got a guy that doesn't give you a good look or a guy that lets the ball come in too deep, I need you to have it out there somewhere so I can get a better look at it. But if guys that catch the ball in deep like here, it gets out of your vision, and you have enough experience to know that I really want to see that ball into the glove because it is possible that thing wound up with the glove on the ground, and it looked good when I last saw it, and now I've got problems, and I would tell that.
That's happening a lot today. I see while I watch pitches, they have that box now.
Yeah.
And the pitch it'll be a breaking ball, and the pitch will just hit either just below that bottom of the strike zone or just above. And they'll say, that was a ball. And I'm thinking that thing went completely through the zone before it landed in your 2-dimensional, God knows where they're, calling from. That doesn't seem to change with every batter either.
You could make an argument that every slider Randy Johnson ever threw that didn't go to the backstop was a strike.
At some point.
Because of where he let it go and where it was caught, it had to cross the plate at some point.
Exactly.
Right.
And that was always the challenge. I was never a big curveball guy, and I didn't have one until later in my career. But 9 times out of 10, the curveball that the catcher catches right above the dirt is a strike.
It's a strike. It's
not a strike. It's physically impossible for it not to be a strike.
Right.
But it's all about appearances in a way, and it gets back to receiving the ball, how the catcher catches.
And basically, I always said that we can claim that all you want. It's just not acceptable. There are certain things in Major League Baseball that you can be right or wrong all you want, but it's not acceptable. They won't live with that.
Dropping the ball, I think,
they can adjust to a lot of things,
today.
but they're never going to adjust to that ever.
Right.
They don't want to adjust to that. All right, well, it's their game. It's a player's game, and even with all the electroanalysis and everything, the players are adjusting to it. The problem is if you bring that system in, and it doesn't do what you hoped it would, how are you going to get it out?
Well, here's the thing. You just said this. There the curveball that catcher catches in the dirt is going to be a strike 90% of the time.
Yep.
And right now it's a strike 10% of the time.
Right. Right.
And the game will accept that.
Yeah.
And like I said, if you truly put the rulebook strike zone in place, and I'm sure we have the technology to potentially do it, you will see your last 300 hitter, because
you'll see
it's
some
not
boring games.
physically possible for a hitter to defend a 95 in the rulebook.
Right.
It's just not possible.
No.
You know,
No,
and
it's
that's
not.
happened over and over again. You know, back to the 70s, they say, okay, we're going to start calling the strike zone as the rule book. And then they start off that way, and then ejections, and they start yelling.
Marty Springstead used to yell over there. He says, "You think I'm happy about it?"
Yeah. But there were certain things that that umpires can do, you don't see it done these days, where you can stop it all. You can stop all of it. Just say, hey, listen, dude, I missed that pitch.
Yeah.
Nobody will say anything after that. Both sides, because everybody respects that. It's the guy who blatantly misses in my opinion, the Greg Gibsons of the world, who I didn't mess that up. And it's like everybody but you knows you just blew the call. Now, that doesn't make you a bad person, but the second you go, you know what, I might have missed that. I got nothing for you then. I'm okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
My father always said, when all else fails, tell the truth.
Right. And it just, like I said, you're talking about 4 guys who are facing an away crowd every single night. And they don't want to spend 4 hours barking back and forth to the dugouts. And usually the guys that do are the young guys who haven't learned yet. Like, your life's going to be a whole lot easier if you're not a rabbit, if you don't hear everything.
You know, there's one more thing that I want to point out, that it just happened the other day in a game with rain delays and everything. That's the other thing I think fans don't realize, is that when it's raining or it's 110, players get to go into the shade and go into the clubhouse and change his shirt and throw on. Umpires don't get out of that. If you're like Adrian Johnson, who was standing in the rain for 4 hours while that ball game was going on and handling rain situations, and they don't realize that how miserable it is that you're the only one standing out in soaked or 110. I remember a couple games in Philadelphia where Doug Harvey would have a wet towel around him. Like you said, Eric Gregg never made it on that turf, in July or August.
It's a hard job, yes, but more importantly, it's a hard job to be good at.
Yes.
There's a big difference, right? I mean, the big leagues are hard, but it's even harder to be great in the big leagues. It's no different with umpires. And, I was always a guy who, within reason, I didn't want the umpires to be the only guys who weren't held to account for their performance. And now that's starting to seep its way in, and and that, to me, that's nothing but a good thing, in the sense that I don't think any umpire ever takes the field and says, I don't care how I do tonight.
Well, that was the thing that scared me most when they expanded replay. And as I said earlier, right near the end of my career, replay had just come in, and the only thing we had was called foul pole to foul pole, and all we could use it for was fair foul calls on home runs and fans reaching over. That was it. And I told my crew, I said, all right, listen, if the ball's near the fence, is it not a home run is the judgment. If it comes back onto the field, unless you're dead sure that it hit the fat guy 4 rows up in the orange shirt, if it's on the field, leave the ball in play, because you'll get some result. They'll run it full speed, and now you can go to the replay and decide, yes, it was, and now you got a result, okay? If now it turns out it was a home run, bring him around.
Right, yeah.
Versus the other way. If you call it a home run, now you got to go, well, he was running on the pitch.
You can't fix that.
This guy doesn't run well.
You can't fix that. Let the play. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
Which is, I don't know if you do watch much hockey, Curt?
That's my life.
Really? Well, I got a lot of buddies that are referees in the NHL.
My life is hockey. Yeah.
Because I called them on it about 2 years ago. There's like 4 guys. Well, Wes McCauley, Chris Rooney are really good friends, and I said, it's looking to me now like when the attacking team is coming, and I played hockey and I refereed college hockey, high school mostly.
My boys all played.
Some college, yeah, and that's right. You're from Maine, of course you played hockey. So, right?
My boys all grew up in Boston, and we're Bruins fans, but my two boys were goaltenders.
Gotcha.
Oh, wow.
So I would say, it's looking like when they're crossing the blue line, attacking like on a 3-on-2 or whatever, if it's close, they don't blow the whistle. They
Right.
let the play go. They shoot. Okay, now the team can challenge whether or not it was offside. Why? Because if he blows the whistle, there is no challenge. What are you going to do? Blow the whistle. Oh, okay, well, it wasn't offside. What are you going to do? Center ice face off?
Yep.
You can't correct it. So, and they all kind of went, well, no, that's not what I said. This is me you're talking to. They said,
Right,
well, that's
right,
what
right,
we've
right.
done. I said, well, you're foolish not to.
Right.
You're always better off to leave the ball in play versus
the
start
game
calling
play.
outs that now are no longer outs.
Let the game play.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
But
it's
I was
funny,
afraid
Timmy.
of with the expansion of replay that what it would bring is guys would no longer go out there with feeling the need to get plays right because you can rely on it too much. And
Yep. Oh, yeah.
I haven't seen that. I have not seen that.
Well, I think that I would argue that the reason it works is because umpires don't ever want to be wrong.
Right.
And now it's even more important to focus and not be wrong because the camera's going to tell you if you are, and you're going to get called out in real time.
Right. Right. And
You have
it's
stats now.
there's a thing
You have
back.
stats.
Yeah, and back in my day, it was we called it the replay roar, when you had a close play, and the manager's now coming out to argue with you. By the time he gets there, they've shown it in the crowd, and I can tell by the reaction of the crowd whether I got it right or wrong. Period. I don't even need to talk to him.
Right.
So, but I haven't seen a lack of effort to try to get it right yourself the first time. There's pride involved, and I was worried about that, and I worried for no reason. It doesn't.
It's a human
exist.
condition. No one wants to be wrong.
No.
And like I said, you're talking about a game, and we started talking about this at the beginning, and it's still something to reemphasize. The speed of the game is incomprehensible to people. I laugh. You see people say, "Well, I could, if you give me 100 swings, I could put a ball." No, you couldn't.
No, you
couldn't touch
can't.
the ball. You couldn't put a ball in play. Nothing.
No.
So no, I've had millions of people come up to me and say, "Yeah, boy, I shouldn't have quit playing when I was in high school." And I got to the point now where I answer that with, "No, you made the right decision."
Yeah,
dude.
exactly. Yeah,
You quit when
you'll
you
love this story because most of the people involved or of them. We were working in Milwaukee, and it was Richie and me and Durwood and Rick Reed. Now, I don't think, did you ever have Durwood, Merrill? Sure you did.
Yep.
Yeah, I keep
He was
forgetting that you
yeah.
pitched in the American League for a
Yeah.
while.
He was
So-
at the end when I came in.
Now, Durwood, not only was he a cowboy from Hooks, Texas, he had the big draw, and he wore a big, 10-gallon hat when we traveled. And Durwood's one of the kindest people I've ever known in my life. He just a peach of a guy. And we had an Sunday afternoon game in Milwaukee, and we're at the airport, and we're walking to our flight, and the Celtics had just played the Bucks, and they were at their gate at their charter, and we walked right past them. Well, Danny Ainge was playing for him it was all the big boys. It was Ainge and McHale and Parrish, and Casey Jones was the coach, and all those guys. And Danny Ainge goes, "Durwood, hey, Durwood, over here." And Durwood looks at him and goes, "Danny Ainge," right? Because I don't know if you recall, but Danny played in the big leagues for a while. He's the number one pick for the Blue Jays. And he goes, "Hey, Durwood, here, tell these guys. You tell them. I could play, couldn't I? I was a good baseball player. I was a really good baseball player. Tell them. Go on, tell them." Durwood looks at him. He goes, "Danny, you made the right choice by going to the big." Casey Jones fell off his chair laughing at him. He says, he looked at Durwood. He goes, "How much? Thank you, sir." He says, "Now we don't have to listen to it anymore. Every time there's a baseball game on, this guy wants to tell us how good he was."
I want to make one last point too. I coached my kids when they were growing up, and one of the things I realized is the only thing that ruins kids' sports are adults.
No question.
My background, I tried to, one of the first things I explained, because I always met with parents before I met with the players. I said, "Listen, the umpires are here for a reason. They didn't earn their way to intramural 13 fast pitch softball.
Right.
Right. The high school umpires, they're high school umpires for a reason. I don't want to hear, because you can't even fathom the depth and the breadth of idiots that you get. I mean, listen, they're doing it for the kids, which is awesome. They're making $50 a game. It's not worth all the crap.
Right.
But if there's any young umpires out there that are amateur umpires, my biggest piece of advice is never allow the parents to interfere on the experience for the kids.
Correct.
And always remember the respect for the game, and make the kids play the game right.
Yep.
Right. You're going to make bad calls and wrong calls. Again, that's why you're doing U15. But you're not going to the big leagues. You're not going to be coaching in the NCAA or umping in the NCAA. So you have a chance to make these kids remember a day,
right,
by being involved. And the parents the same way. There's so many teaching moments at that level that umpires could utilize instead of antagonize. You can the parents are horrible. You can turn around and look at the parents and go, hey guys, this is not about you. These kids are out here trying to have fun, compete, and win, and the only thing you're doing is ruin the experience for them. And if it gets beyond that, then you kick them out.
Right. Move them.
Because it's about the kids. And God bless them all. Again, $50 a game, $30 a game for the crap that they put up with. Six figures for the game is not worth it sometimes in the big leagues.
No. I'm part of a committee here in Minnesota with a guy from the Minnesota State High School League who I've known forever. We're putting together a video, and it's going to include myself, Jeff Nelson, and Mark Wagner, who are all from Minnesota, St. Paul. And then Kenny Mauer's retired out of the NBA, and we've got two guys in the NHL, and then we've got some D1 officials, and we're trying to get people to get involved in it because no one will do it, and we're actually going to high school football teams and basketball teams and say, look, one of you is going to play at the next level, maybe two of you because you got a really good team. If you want to stay around the game, this is something you might want to consider. I said, the next time you're sitting on the bench, watch those guys. Just watch them, see what they're doing, see how they interact with the players and one another and what's involved. And all of a sudden you'll realize, man, he had to hustle to get to that spot, to get a good look at that play. And I said, it's a fight or flight experience when you officiate. Because people, when I'd meet them for the first time and they'd find out I was an umpire, they'd say, oh, God, I had to do that one time, my kid's game. I didn't show up, and they dragged me out of the stands. I don't ever want to do that again for as long as I live. Other guys it kind of grabs you because
it's like a police ride-along.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge.
It's like a police ride-along. Right. Ride along with me one day and get in my shoes, and you're either going to appreciate what I do, hate me for it, or want to do it for the rest of your life.
A ride-along. I'm going to use that. That's so accurate.
Yeah.
But there's a nationwide shortage for the same reason. People they get out of it because it's just parents are too crazy.
Well, and they don't get out of it because of the kids. They get out of it because of the adults.
It's the parents.
Next time, Tim and Curt Schilling tell some hilarious behind-the-scenes stories about Major League umpires and some can't-miss pitcher's insight for success. So tune in. And you can join Curt Schilling on his The Complete Game podcast. The link is found in the description below, or use your favorite search page.